Tyrone.
Hey, how you doing, Jeff?
Good.
Jeff Benner, I appreciate you coming on my podcast today. From what I understand, you're an author of one of over 20 books related to the studies of alphabet, language, and culture of the Bible, and is an instructor in biblical Hebrew. You've taught thousands, from what I understand and read from your website, and how to read the Bible in the Hebrew for themselves. And that's basically what I wanted you to come on this show for me to discuss with you, because that's what I actually want to do today is not today, but I want to learn more from somebody who has, the interpretations and translations of the Hebrew text.
Okay. Yeah.
So I asked you for this discussion, like I said, because like I told you just earlier, I'm interested in ancient history, and my biggest interest right now is the Elohim. And from what I understand about Judaism, is it's a monotheistic religion that developed among the ancient Hebrews. And today, the idea in Christianity is that there is only one God. From my understanding of Elohim, that's plural, correct?
It is.
Okay.
The eem at the end identifies it as a plural masculine noun.
Okay. And does that mean that there are many gods?
No.
No?
Well, yes and no.
Yes and no. Can you explain that too, please?
Oh yeah, let me explain the word Elohim, because it's not as cut and dried as most people would assume.
Right.
First of all, in Hebrew, it's an ancient language that's very different from our modern Western language.
Okay.
So if we assume we're going to understand their language from the perspective of our own language, we're going to get things all wrong.
Okay.
And plurals are a really good example. In our language, a plural means more than one.
Right.
Period. That's it. That's it. One tree, two trees. Okay. Hebrew plurals work completely different. There's different kinds of plurals. For example, trees. Okay, etz is a tree. Singular is etz. The plural is etzim, but it doesn't mean trees. It means wood.
Okay. Okay.
So it changes the meaning.
Okay.
Now, many times, don't get me wrong, 99% of the time when you see a plural Hebrew word, it means more than one.
Right.
And so that's one of the uses of a plural. The other plural is to change the context. Like instead of tree, it's wood. Tree is singular, etz. The plural etzim means wood.
Mm-hmm.
There's no differentiation between tree and trees in biblical Hebrew. Okay. Now, in modern Hebrew, yes. In modern Hebrew, etzim means trees. Okay. But in biblical Hebrew, it means wood. So etz can mean tree or trees, which brings up an interesting thing in Genesis chapter, 3, where the tree of knowledge is introduced.
Mm-hmm.
You have the tree of knowledge, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But is that trees of knowledge? Is it a forest of knowledge of good and evil? You see, you could make that interpretation from the Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see that in the English translations, unfortunately. But in Hebrew, that's a very acceptable interpretation, is trees of knowledge of good and evil.
Okay.
So when we get to the word Elohim, it doesn't necessarily mean more than one. It can mean more than one. There are times where the word Elohim refers to gods in the plural. Okay. And the context bears that out. However, in Hebrew, a plural can also mean magnificence, greatness. A good example is the word behemoth. We see in the book of Job the behemoth. Okay, in Hebrew, that's pronounced behemoth. And that's a plural. It's actually a feminine plural. Ot is the feminine plural ending. Okay. But it's used in a singular sense. The grammar of how it's constructed is used in a singular sense. Behema is the feminine singular. Behemoth is the plural. But it uses the plural because it's not talking about just a small animal, but a very large beast. Okay. A lot of people think this could be a dinosaur, But in any case, behemoth is just a very, very large behemoth. So we can say the same thing with Elohim. It's the very, very large Eloah. Eloah is the singular for God. Okay. Elohim is the plural. So Elohim can be gods, or it could be a great God. You see?
Like an almighty God?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, now Almighty, if you want to talk about that, that's completely different.
Oh, okay.
And it's a very interesting subject if you want to go there later.
Okay.
But because it doesn't mean Almighty. When we see Almighty God, it's El Shaddai in Hebrew. It doesn't mean Almighty.
Okay.
It means something different, but the translators don't want to translate it that way. But anyway, let's get back on track here. So Elohim can be gods, or it can be a great God. The grammar will usually dictate. For example, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, the first time we see the word Elohim, it begins, Bereshit bara Elohim. Okay? Bereshit means in the beginning. Bara is the verb meaning to create, but it identifies the subject of the verb as third person masculine singular, he.
Okay.
Singular masculine. He created. Okay. Now, the subject of the verb follows the verb. So I hope I'm not confusing your readers here. Bara means he created.
Okay.
The he is the subject of the verb. The subject of the verb also follows the verb, which is Elohim. So Elohim is the he, singular.
Okay. I see.
So we know that Elohim has to be, in this case, it's a singular great God. Okay. It's not gods, it's great God. Now, if the writer wanted to say gods, instead of bara, it would be baru. That's they created, plural, masculine. Okay? So if he wanted to say they as in gods, it would be Bereshit baru Elohim. But no, we have Bereshit bara Elohim, which means he created.
Okay. And what book of yours describes who the Elohim are? The best for beginners who would want to learn more about the Elohim in the ancient Hebrew.
Okay, well, I go in my book, His Name is One, I go into the different names of God, and that includes Elohim. I explain in there what El is, the word El, which is like the base word, and then Eloah, which is derived from that, and then Elohim. So I have a whole chapter that goes into those three words and how they interrelate to each other and what they mean and how they're used within the biblical text. Now, if you want to get to the gods, where the Bible does talk about the gods, then that's not necessarily a subject I really get into. But it should be understood that the ancient, while modern Christianity and Judaism is monotheistic, the ancient Hebrews were not monotheistic. They were henotheistic.
Okay. Can you explain that?
Yeah. Okay. Most people are familiar with the term monotheism, which is one, theism, God, one God. Polytheism, poly means many, theism, God, so the belief in gods, so many gods. Henotheism is the belief in many gods, but you only worship one God.
Right.
In the case of the Hebrews, that would be Yahweh. And so the Bible acknowledges the existence of other gods. It just tells Israel, you don't have anything to do with them.
Okay.
Those are for the other nations.
Okay.
I am your God, Yahweh, your Elohim, your great God.
Okay. That makes sense. And see, that I like how you put that. When I read a lot about from Samuel Noah Kramer, he talks about the golden age, an age of perfect happiness when men lived without toil or strife. The Sumerian view of the golden age is found in the epic tale of Enmarker in the land of Ararata. I believe I said that correctly. But in what Samuel Noah Kramer believed when he wrote that was that that may have been the first inkling of Sumerian parallel to the biblical Tower of Babel. And I was just kind of interested in more of, do you think that the Elohim were possibly could have been derived from an earlier belief from like the Sumerians or the the Babylonians?
Okay, understand. I think it's quite possible.
Okay.
There is one thing that's in the text that might be related to the subject in Genesis chapter 6.
Okay.
The Nephilim.
Okay.
There's a passage in that verse that says that they were the heroes of old, the men of renown. That's the translation. However, in the Hebrew, it literally says that these are the warriors from Olam. Now, the word Olam means usually beyond the horizon, very far, distant, either in space or time.
Okay.
And it's usually translated as forever or eternity or eternal or something like that.
Okay.
But it literally just means beyond the horizon. So when it says the heroes of old, the men of renown, they're taking these words and translating it that way to try and make it make sense. But literally what it's saying in the Hebrew is that these are the warriors from Olam.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a name place, not a noun. Not a noun being a distant place or time, but a place, Olam, which may be connected to Olympus and those gods. Okay. You see the connection there.
Okay.
I can't confirm that.
Right.
But it just makes a lot of sense to me.
And that's why I asked, because like I said, my curiosity is in ancient history. And from what I understand, Hinduism is the oldest religion practiced today. I should have said that whole thing, but Hinduism is the oldest religion practiced today. And I wonder, because a lot of people who have shared, like academically, you got Samuel Noah Kramer, George Smith, Andrew George, who share that the Sumerians are the founders of the first writing system. And I understand that they started off like with pictographs, basically pictures of words, or whatever you may want to call it. I've heard it so many different ways. And those words or those pictures describe certain words or many words, depending on the way it was used. Is that the same thing with ancient Hebrew, not the modern version, but the ancient?
A little different.
Okay.
Actually, let's talk about the different ancient writing systems from about 3000 BC.
Okay.
We have Egyptian hieroglyphs,
right,
which are picture writing,
mm-hmm.
which is almost the same thing as the Sumerian cuneiform.
Right.
There are thousands of different pictures using the wedge-shaped, tool.
Right.
Wedge, meaning wedge and form shape, cuneiform, wedge shape. So it's kind of the same. You have the ancient Egyptians and the Sumerians with the same style of writing with pictures.
Right.
One with pictures you can see, one with wedge shapes. Then you have alphabets. Egyptian developed the hieratic, which is an alphabet of 30 some odd characters, and it uses the pictures from their hieroglyphs to write this diacritic script.
Okay.
And it's an alphabet.
Okay.
Sumerian doesn't have that. However, Ebla, the Ugarit, Ebla, the Canaanite people, they used a cuneiform alphabet. Okay, so it's the wedge-shaped letters or wedge-shaped images to make these letters. So here you have diacritic, and then which is from the hieroglyphs, and then you have the cuneiform alphabet, which is derived from like the Sumerian.
Okay.
And then you have the Hebrew pictographic script, which is like the Egyptian diacritic. I'm not saying diacritic right. I don't know. It's not a diacritic. I can't remember the word.
I get tongue-tied all the time. I know you heard it throughout. I get tongue-tied a lot. I have to write my things down sometimes before I want to say it, because I get really...
A lot of times what the problems for us is when we read and we don't get so much from lectures and we
right.
get more from reading, we don't get the pronunciation.
Right. Exactly.
I know the pronunciation of that word, I just can't think of it. But anyway, you know what word I can't even think of it. It's not a diuretic. Anyway, so that Egyptian alphabet is almost identical to the Hebrew alphabet, which is almost identical to the cuneiform alphabet.
Okay.
So all these three are they're different and they're separated, but they're all similar. And then you have the Hebrew pictographic alphabet that evolved into what we call Paleo-Hebrew, which is a simplified form of the writing. And then the Paleo-Hebrew became our modern Hebrew alphabet, Aramaic.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. It helps me out understand it better. I know you explain this stuff in your books, but like I said, I want to get when I get your books, because you're recommended by so many people, you have no idea.
Really?
Like, I'm telling you, I picked up this I guess you can call it a hobby, because this is something that I enjoy doing. I picked this up about 2 years ago. In the last maybe 8 months, I've been saying to my followers, people who follow me on my social media pages and stuff like that, and listen to my podcast and watch my YouTube, they tell me, hey, you got to get in contact with Jeff Benner. You have to get in contact with him because he wrote a lot of books, and you have the translations and you understand it and you're teaching people. So what I did was I said, okay, I'm going to put his books in my Amazon cart, and I buy a book every 2 or 3 weeks. And yours are actually coming up. And I know that when I first contacted you or try to contact you, you say that it tells you on your email, it takes about 30 days just for you to even check it because you're a very busy person. So it was an honor just to get you here. And I was reading, and I read a lot from your website, and I read a lot of stuff, and I watch I watch the YouTube channels and all that stuff like that with you in them and stuff like that. So I know about you, just not what your actual books say. And
sure. Yeah.
And it's interesting because from your website, ancient-hebrew.org, you write that most biblical and Hebrew teachings are missing a key ingredient, a cultural background to the language of the Bible. Do you mind elaborating on that?
Sure. This is, I think, this was not my original focus on the website, although it has become this, and the kind of the direction I want to go in the future with my writing and with my website.
Okay.
Is that when we are reading the Bible or any ancient text for that matter, from our own cultural perspective, we're going to get it wrong.
Okay.
A good example of a colloquial example is thumbs up and thumbs down. We all know that thumbs up means good and thumbs down means bad. However, there is evidence that that's not what they originally meant.
Right.
Well, it's believed that the thumbs up, when the Caesar gave the thumbs up to the gladiator who had the man down on the ground and his foot on his throat, and he looks up at the Caesar, if he gives him a thumbs up, that means take your sword and put it to his throat. Kill him.
Right.
If it puts thumbs down, it means throw your sword to the ground. He lives.
Okay.
So if that's true, that what they believe is true, then 2,000 years, we've gotten everything backwards.
Right.
In Hebrew, we have the same problem, is a flood, for example. Let's think of floods. If you see the word flood across your TV, you're thinking, oh my gosh, disaster.
Right.
People are dying. This is terrible. Oh, woe is us. Calamity, destruction. Those are the things that we think of when we think of the word flood. That's not what the Hebrews think. The Hebrews would think things like life, brightness, cheer. Wait, what? From a flood?
Right. Like a rebirth almost, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
It is a rebirth because in the deserts of the Near East, the deserts are dead without the water from the mountains flooding the Nile and the other rivers and depositing the nutrients in the soil so the plants can grow. So floods are seen as life-giving, not death.
Right. And that's where
totally opposite. So we're going to read in the Psalms where he says that Yahweh comes riding on a flood. We're thinking destruction. The writer's thinking life. You see, we're going to get it wrong. That's why it's so important to understand the Bible from the perspective and culture of the ancient Hebrews, not from our own.
Right. And I'm glad you said that because, even today, our cultural differences have us worshiping Jesus in many different ways. It hasn't changed. It's so weird to me. And when you said the word cultural, it made me wonder what culture was the first to do this. Like I said, Hinduism is the oldest religion. It's not the first religion. It's the oldest religion practiced today. It's the only one that I can say that I've learned that is as close as what we can get to the original without many changes. Yes, the Sumerians have their writings and the Babylonians and stuff like that, but they don't. Their religion is not worshipped today. So it just makes me wonder, because I understand that Shinar was basically Sumer. And I know we talked about Zechariah Sitchin. I don't want to get too much into it, but I know he has his theories. But I've read the Oxford version ancient text. And in many ways, it's so weird because everybody has a different interpretation of what was said. And it takes a lot for me to break down each one of them, because I've read, I don't know if you know who Robert Alter is. Yeah. Wrote a book, a Hebrew book. He has a Hebrew book translation with commentary in there, right? Mm-hmm. And I love the book because I know a lot of people will go around and they'll share their scripture about the New International Version or the King James Version, which is fine. But those two are different. They have different meanings within the book. The words, some of the words are different, and that can mean for different things of a belief. So when I learned about the Elohim and the word plural, and you broke it down what it really means, because I was so confused when you said that trees could mean wood. That makes more sense, because it gives you an idea of how one tree can be turned into trees by being cut up. If I thought about it correctly.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just making sure I'm on the right page, because that's how I think. Is like, I understand that now. And when you say the original text, that's where I'm trying to find out, is where the original text came from. Where did the original beliefs come from? I know I'm probably not going to be able to find it in my lifetime, but the journey onto that is fun and fascinating. It's very interesting.
I like that you phrase it as a journey, because I do the same. We're all on a journey. Right. I get this a lot from the people when they say, I don't know as much as you, and, I don't, they're putting themselves down because they don't have that much knowledge. And I say, look, we're not on a journey from beginning to end with a start and a finish. We're on a circle. We're all on the same circle. We're at different places on the circle. And if you'll notice, a circle doesn't have a beginning or an end. It's just on the same circle. It's one long journey. Right. And that's what the ancient Hebrews were as nomads. They did a circuit every year. They followed this circle. And we're on the same thing. We're the same thing on a path, looking for the answers. We'll never get them all, because we're going to get more questions. We may answer a question we had, but then we're going to get 2 more questions. Okay. It's fun. It's fun.
And that's what I love about the interpretations of all the books that I read from the people. Like I've read the Popol Vuh, the Mahabharata, the Rig Veda. I've read the Book of Enoch. I've read a lot of the Sumerian texts, Assyrian texts. I read a lot of different ancient texts, and a lot of it is available online, so it makes it that much easier to read it. But I also buy the hard copy books because it helps me go to that book with the feeling in hand and saying, hey, this is what this person thought at that time. And then you get their revised version from a later period, and you're like, you got to compare their notes. What did they learn since then? And that leads me to another question. I didn't really want to keep you too long on this. This was something like short and go, because I can talk about this stuff all day. But have you ever decided to go back and revise any of your work?
Oh yeah, I'm actually struggling right now with wanting to revise my lexicon. Actually,
okay.
I have revised my books. A few of them.
Right.
Like, for example, His Name is One. I published that in 2003. That's almost 20 years ago.
Right.
Not that I changed the content. I don't think I changed any content in any of my books. I just updated spelling, error, grammar, different fonts, formatting type thing, So, but I've never really had to feel like I need to go and rewrite any of my material. The only exception to that is I want to do a second edition of my lexicon, only because of so much more research in the last 20 years since I published that. Yeah. One of the first things that somebody will recognize with my translations and my dictionary work, lexicon work, is that things don't flow as easily as they normally do when you're reading a translation or a dictionary. And because of that is because of the uniqueness of the language. Okay. I try and stay as Hebraic as possible so that your mind starts thinking Hebraically. Okay. This is the trick. When you're reading the Bible, you got to start thinking Hebraically. So Hebrew is very concrete oriented language. It does not like abstracts. Okay. Abstracts like hope, peace, love. And Hebrew they don't use them.
Why is that? Why is that, may I ask?
Why is what?
Why is that? Why is it?
Oh, well, okay. Very simple. draw me a picture of a tree.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that. Draw
Right.
me a picture of water. These are concrete.
Right.
Your mind can easily grasp these
Right.
concepts, make a picture of them.
Right.
Now, draw me a picture of love. You really can't, or peace, or hope.
Yep.
You really can't. I mean, you could draw a heart symbol for
or
love,
dignity. Or dignity.
Or dignity, yeah. Or how about deity?
Yeah.
Okay. All of these abstract words that we use, we fill our language with abstract words.
Mm-hmm.
Hebrew does not use abstracts; they use concretes.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, joy.
Okay.
Okay, that's an abstract word.
Mm-hmm.
How do you draw a picture of joy? You can't. In Hebrew, the Hebrew word, there's actually several words that can be translated as joy, but what they literally mean is to dance around in a circle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So yeah, that's very visual, very concrete oriented.
Okay.
So that's the first thing to understand. If you're reading a translation, you come across an abstract word, you would want to study out that word,
Right.
find out what it means concretely, then you'll get a better understanding. So like when it says that the earth sings with joy, okay, sings with dancing in a circle, okay,
right.
You got to start getting the imagery that you see the Hebrews would have. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is that the cultural thing. You got to understand. Am I getting off track? What was the question?
No. This is going. I'm telling you, what you've been talking about. I wrote a lot of these questions down. You've already blown through them. That's why I said this is pretty quick, because I didn't even get to ask some of them. You already went straight to it.
Awesome. So the lexicon, the first thing I recognize is that it tries to bring out the concreteness of the language.
Okay.
The second thing is the cultural perspective. For example, the Garden of Eden, the garden.
Okay.
In Hebrew, that's gone. You would spell that in English, G-A-N, gone.
Okay.
A has an ah sound in Hebrew. That is the origin of the word magen, or magen, like okay. Magen David, or the magen, the Star of David.
Right.
The magen is actually the word magen means shield.
Okay.
So it's actually the shield of David. So gone is a shield. The garden is a place of protection. Okay, it's not about planting vegetables; it's about a place of protection.
Okay,
you get that from the language, but you lose that in the translation.
Oh.
So that's what the purpose of the lexicon is to bring out that cultural understanding of what those words are, and it connects. I'm sorry, what?
Oh no, go ahead. I'm shocked. This is making sense to me better.
Okay. The other purpose of the lexicon is to group all the words together.
Okay.
A lot of people are familiar with Strong's dictionary. So,
right.
like, for example, if you look up the word believe, the verb believe, okay, Strong's will give you that definition. But if you look up the word, let's say amen, okay, A-M-E-N, that's the word amen in Hebrew. You don't know that, Strong's dictionary will tell you that comes from the word that means believe. That's the verb that means believe. So there's a connection there. But you don't see that when you look up the word believe. It doesn't tell you what all of the nouns are that are derived from that verb.
Okay.
So that's what my lexicon does. Here's the verb. This is aman. It means to believe.
Okay.
And then from this come all of these different nouns.
Okay.
And what they mean. And they're all related. They're all related in meaning. Okay, so that's the third purpose of my lexicon, is to group, the words together that are all interrelated due to their etymological connections.
Okay, that makes sense, and I'm gonna definitely look on and read more about lexicon and stuff like that, because it's like you really have to have a foundation basics of the English meanings first. Like, you have to understand what a noun is, a verb, and all that stuff is. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
so
share a story with you.
Okay.
Let me share a story with you. This should bring. When I was in first starting to learn Hebrew back in the 80s, and they started talking about prepositions and nouns, adverbs, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what are these? So I had to stop learning Hebrew and first go learn English. Right.
Yeah. And that's basically where I'm at, because I when I looked at your website, I kind of got the feel of that basically, I know the foundations and basics and stuff of English, but I still have to refresh on it and understand it better, because it makes a whole different it means so much different when you're going to something else like Hebrew and trying to learn that language. And it's mind-blowing because sometimes I go back and look up what does a verb mean. Even though I know what it means, I still have to go back and look just to verify, so that way I'm not mistaken, because it does take, if you mistakenly translate something or understand something wrong, it throws you off completely. And I think that's why we have so many different translations and stuff like that right now. And a good point of that is I was talking to somebody, I can't remember, a few days ago. It's in Genesis. I can't remember exactly where. I think it's Genesis 28:10, I believe. And it talks about, I think it's about the Jacob's ladder. It's about Jacob's ladder. Okay, Robert Alter talks about in there that it wasn't a ladder, but a ramp. Was it a ramp or a ladder? Because he says that it couldn't have been a ladder because of the origins of the word.
I don't have my Bible with me or my text with me, so I can't look it up. But if I will look it up and get back with you on that. That's an interesting question. I do remember seeing that when I was working on the translation. Wait a minute. What do I have in my translation? I can access that. Do you know what verse that is in?
I believe it's Genesis 28:10.
28. Hold on, let me see what, because my mechanic. Have you seen my mechanical translation on the website?
Yes.
Okay.
I was talking to one of my buddies about it, but I had brought it up because it was written in Robert Alter's book. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Genesis 28.
Let me see.
And what verse? Oh, wait, I found it. It's verse 12.
12. Okay.
All right. So, for those that aren't familiar with my mechanical translation, there's two translations. There's the mechanical, which translates every Hebrew word exactly the same way every time it appears, including the prefixes, suffixes. So that reads, and he will dream, and look, ladder, be, make, stand upping, land unto, and head him. That reads really poorly because that's in the same order as the Hebrew.
Okay.
Then I do a revised mechanical translation where I rearrange the words so they make sense in English.
Mm-hmm.
And he dreamed, and look, a ladder is standing erect. Okay, I use ladder.
Mm-hmm.
The Hebrew word is,
I think it's that
sulam.
Sulam, yeah.
Sulam. In my dictionary, I have used to raise up, a structure for climbing up or down. Okay. So, climbing implies a ladder, but it could be just as easily a ramp.
Okay.
I could see that very easily,
Okay.
Now, if we let's look this up in the lexicon, which I also have online.
Okay. This is good because we just talked about this a few days ago. I can't, it was in Robert Alter's book in the commentary. He wrote about that it wasn't a ladder, that it was a ramp. And he compared it to a ziggurat, the Mesopotamian ziggurats.
Oh yeah.
So it made me wonder, like, I can see that more if visually somebody looking at somewhat, because the Mesopotamian ziggurats were where the gods resided at. That was basically, I guess, their homes, I guess. And they were always on the top. And gods, according to many scriptures, God sent messengers to the people. And I kind of see how that can be related to, a Mesopotamian king or whatever who's been deified as a god sends his messengers from the top of his ziggurat to the bottom to tell his people, hey, this is what's going to happen.
Okay. All right. I looked this up in my lexicon, which is available at the Ancient Hebrew Research Center /AHLB for the lexicon. And the first thing I noticed here, there's words that come from the root. The root, I believe, is sul.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are two words that come from that. Sulat, which is flower, and sulam, which is this ladder.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the things I've noticed, that the fewer the words that come from a specific root, the more obscure the meaning of the word is.
Okay.
Makes sense? So the more words we have that come from a singular root, the more defined the meaning of a word is. Okay. So in this case, it's going to be very ambiguous. It's going to be very difficult to come up with a real secure meaning So not really much help there in the lexicon.
No, and I'm glad I remember that. I just take the time to read people's books, and what I do is I take people's books and I read them, and I read them seriously. I don't read it as leisure, and I don't read it as a joke or trying to debunk somebody or anything like that. I read it seriously because I honestly, truly want to understand and learn.
You want to know what that person believes from their perspective. What do they have to teach you?
Exactly. Like,
awesome.
That's exactly what I'm doing.
My mantra, if you will, has been for many, many years. I believe everything I believe is true, but I know that not everything I believe is true.
I like that. I like that. I really do. We're at like 40 minutes now, Jeff. And
wow.
Like I said, I can keep going on. And I'm going to ask you, do you mind doing another one after this, after I read one of your books?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be open to doing it.
Thank you.